I was settling down last week to watch the telly for the night when I heard a curious rattling sound that made me cold with fright. I tiptoed into the hallway and was just in time to see a letter coming through the door. It was addressed to me. There wasn't any postmark or a postage stamp or date, and I couldn't think who'd push a letter through the door that late. Then, being curious, I opened it and slowly read it through. It was full of cliché sentences. I'm great, and how are you, and do you ever see the old gang now, how fast the time has gone? And then with a flourish ended, sincerely, Michael John. The handwriting was pleasing, he formed his letters well, but just who this cliché maker was, I simply couldn't tell. For beneath the bridge in my long life, much water's come and gone, and I've met a lot of characters that could be Michael John. Was he the tramp who grabbed my arm one night in Dublin City, saying, "I'm starving, mister, help me, for the love of God have pity. I've a wife and 14 children, not a stitch upon their backs, and I'll pay you back as soon as I have cleared me income tax"? Or perhaps he was the farmer that I met in Wakelet Town, who said, "Give me your pencil and I'll write the address down. If we ever win the Sway Prize, I'll do a water tour, and I'll make the trip from Merkle up to Dublin, to be sure." Or the man from Enniscorthy, who I picked up outside Gowrie, and between Camolan and New Ross recounted his life story, how he'd sailed the 7 seas and run an Arctic whaling station, but he'd never seen the baiting of the Barra Navigation. Or he might have been the Chancellor on the quay at Waterford, who told me that despite his rags, he really was a lord. I must excuse his language for being somewhat dear the knuckle, but his family was descended from the Earls of Ballytuckle. Or perhaps he was the poet with whom I met in Cork, who told me that he'd gladly lay his life down for his work. He'd starve himself and suffer for his art, I needn't fear. But just in case, he was a full-time civil engineer. Or was he the dingle farmer whom I stopped in Estaway, saying I sought accommodation for a family holiday, and he said, "I'll let a caravan with pull-down beds and shelves. Oh, there's one thing, will we eat you now, or will ye eat yourselves?" Or it might have been in Limerick, where a man at Thomond Gate said he'd seen the ghost of Sarsfield walk one night when it was late, and how the ghost had wandered round the moonlit Treaty Stone. With his parting, "Good luck out of it," I felt very much alone. Or was he the fiddle player, aged 90 out in Clare, and he turned the night to magic with a haunting Irish air, and he told me he was famous from the Burn up to Carna, and how the girls went mad for him each year in Lisdonvarna. Or perhaps he was the character I met above Linan, and he told me that you couldn't beat a Connemara man, and he pointed out a salmon as it fought the river's might, saying, "I'll be down and throw a hemp fly over that big lad tonight." Or the lad in Ballahornis, who entertained the crowd with a pop song which he wrote himself, 'twas tuneless as 'twas loud, and when he'd finished singing, shyly joined me at my car, saying, "Did I think that if he entered it, 'twould win at Cashel-Bar?" And then there was the poet who was well and truly mad, and sat by Yeats's grave all day and scribbled on a pad, "I will arise and go now, and go and feed the coots, and whether they are dear or not, I do not give 2 hoots." Or was he the Michael John I met one day below Gweedore, and he asked me was I stopping or maybe travelling on some more, for it looked like turning into rain that not get in the hay, and I'd surely be right welcome if I'd stop and eat the day. Or the chap I met in Derry, down by the waterside, and he said he'd buy a drink for me if I would like to bide, for he'd not be talking politics, beliefs we'd leave alone, for my faith in how I voted was no one's business but my own. Then I wondered was it Belfast, where I finished up my drink, and I turned the tumbler upside down. Now why I cannot think, but it signifies you're ready for to take the toughest on. I was told this rather threateningly by a man named Michael John. Or was it Dundalk or Drogheda, where Cromwell did his worst, and spelt the blood in rivers for to satisfy his thirst? No, I can't recall a fella by the name of Michael John, unless he introduced himself and I was too far gone. Or it might have been the Midlands, by Loch Owl or Mullingar, where I asked a lad directions and I travelling through by car, and he sent me on the wrong route. He must have thought I was a fool, for he sent me through Tawshinny, and I going to Ambishrool. Well, I folded up the letter and I went to get me coat, for this trip around the country had brought a dryness to me throat. And I was seated in me local and me first pint just half gone when I heard a stranger saying, "Ah, he's dead, poor Michael John. He said he'd left a letter for an old and treasured friend whom he'd like to meet again, 'cause he was ill and near the end. He was sitting where that man is sitting now, poor Michael John. But he'll not renew acquaintance now. The ambulance is gone."